Usually, when we talk about a medical diagnosis, there's this, this underlying expectation of precision. It feels kind of like engineering.
Right, yeah. Like a math problem.
Exactly. Like if you break your arm, the x-ray shows that jagged white line against the black background, and the doctor just points at the film and says, there it is. It's binary. Broken or not broken.
And, I mean, we're naturally drawn to that kind of clarity. We have this fundamental human preference for things that are visible.
Oh, for sure.
Things that can be, easily categorized, measured, sorted into neat little boxes. It gives us a sense of control over just how unpredictable health can be.
But the moment you step out of the physical body and into, well, the world of neurodevelopment or personality disorders and deep psychological trauma, that metaphorical x-ray machine just completely shatters.
It does. It really does.
We find ourselves looking at a diagnostic landscape that is just incredibly murky. You think you're looking at a broken bone, but the machine is showing you a shadow or like a reflection.
Right. Or, even more terrifying, the machine is projecting a picture of a perfectly healthy, incredibly strong arm over one that is actually, splintered into 1,000 pieces.
Yeah. Wow. That's a terrifying image, actually.
But it's accurate. Because when we move into the architecture of the human mind, especially a mind that has spent decades building these elaborate interlocking fortresses to protect itself from perceived annihilation, our standard tools of observation they completely fail us.
We end up analyzing the camouflage instead of the structure underneath.
Exactly. We're looking at the paint job, not the engine.
Which is exactly why we are jumping into this specific material today. We are pulling from an incredibly dense, profoundly revealing November 2024 interview with Professor Sam Vaknin, and the mission for this deep dive is to completely deconstruct the mind of a narcissist.
And it is a wild ride, let me tell you.
It really is. But we're looking at a very specific set of circumstances today for you listening. We're unpacking how a narcissist responds to being caught, how they process the concept of remorse, or I guess the absolute void where remorse should be.
Right, the void is the key word there.
Yeah. And what it is fundamentally like to try and share reality with someone whose brain actively rejects reality. Okay. Unpack this.
Well, to even begin unpacking this, we really have to establish a baseline that is profoundly uncomfortable for most empathetic people to accept.
Okay.
The core error almost everyone makes when trying to engage with or argue with or just understand someone with pathological narcissism is the assumption of a shared consensus of reality.
Right. The idea that we are all, breathing the same psychological air.
Exactly.
We assume that if you and I are in a room, we both agree the sky outside is blue, and we both agree that if I step hard on your foot, it causes you pain.
Yeah.
And therefore, I should probably feel bad about causing that pain.
Right, because we project our normal emotional framework. Empathy, logic, cause and effect onto them. But the narcissist, they do not participate in that shared consensus.
So they're not in the same room, psychologically speaking.
Not at all. The framework you just described requires an internal mechanism that actually recognizes the autonomy and the internal emotional state of another human being.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And pathological narcissism, by its very nature, precludes that recognition. They're operating in an entirely different atmospheric pressure.
Okay, so if they aren't in our reality, if they don't recognize the autonomy of the person sitting across from them, how do they perceive a situation where they've done something objectively harmful?
That's the million-dollar question.
Like, let's say they've lied, betrayed a partner, or actively sabotaged a colleague. A normal person feels guilt. And the source text hits this so hard right out of the gate, pointing out this complete inversion of how we understand harm.
Yeah, it starts with the concept of the victim. The material reveals that very few narcissists actually possess the cognitive or emotional capacity to perceive other people as victims.
Wait, regardless of what they did?
Regardless.
Yeah.
It literally does not matter what the nature of the interpersonal interaction is or, how egregious the mistreatment, the abuse, or the financial ruin they caused might be.
That's hard to wrap my head around.
I know. But the vast majority of narcissists will immediately and almost reflexively self-victimize.
They assume the victimhood identity, even when they are the ones holding the smoking gun, standing over the metaphorical body.
Precisely. They do not look at the damage they caused and process the thought, look what I did to you. The internal mechanism immediately translates the scenario into, look what you made me do.
Or like, look at the impossible, agonizing situation I was unfairly placed in.
Exactly. The text notes, they instantly rewrite the script. They create this entirely new narrative out of thin air where their actions were inevitable or they were aggressively provoked.
Okay, the best way I can visualize this is imagining a movie director on a film set, but this director insists on also playing the lead actor.
Oh, I like this.
And halfway through filming a scene where his character is clearly written as the villain, like he's robbing a bank, taking hostages, he suddenly yells, "Cut!"
Right.
And he frantically starts rewriting the script in real time. He's crossing out lines, changing the lighting, and telling the actors playing the terrified bank tellers that they are actually the oppressive forces trying to destroy him.
Yes, that's it exactly.
He does all of this mental gymnastics just to ensure that when the scene finally wraps, the camera lingers on him as the tragic, misunderstood hero. He simply cannot allow a script to exist, even in his own mind, where he's the bad guy.
Because allowing that script to exist would require acknowledging a flaw. It would require acknowledging an imperfection, which totally threatens the grandiose self-image that keeps their psyche intact.
The script must always serve the grandiosity of the director.
Always. If the objective reality of the situation contradicts that flawless image, well, reality is simply discarded.
But wait, if we look at this logically, surely they feel some kind of internal friction. I mean, if a narcissist is standing right in front of a partner who is openly weeping, completely devastated by a massive betrayal, there has to be a mechanism for remorse in there somewhere, right?
Oh, you would think so?
Yeah, because they aren't robots, they are human beings, and humans have physiological responses to the distress of others.
And this is where the nuance of the clinical material is just so vital. It is a misconception that narcissists, or even psychopaths, are entirely incapable of experiencing emotions that look externally like remorse, guilt, or shame.
Wait, really? So they do feel it?
They absolutely experience those feelings. The difference lies in what we call the locus of remorse.
It's the locus of remorse. Okay, break that down for me.
So the focal point of the emotion is entirely alien to a healthy person's experience. If you or I cause someone to cry, our guilt is centered entirely on their pain.
Right, we feel terrible because they feel terrible. The locus is external, it's focused on the other person.
But for the narcissist, the remorse is strictly results-oriented. It is consequence-oriented and entirely self-referential.
So when they see those tears...
When they see those tears, they are not feeling shame because they caused a traumatic emotional wound. They are feeling shame for feeling.
Failing at what? The relationship.
Failing to manage the partner effectively. Failing to maintain the illusion. Failing to make the partner feel good so that the partner could continue to be a compliant, easily manipulated source of supply.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. If a narcissist is caught in a devastating lie, their regret isn't, "I shouldn't have lied because dishonesty destroys trust and I value your trust."
Right.
Their regret is, "I failed to execute this lie successfully. I was sloppy, I left a paper trail, I failed to manipulate the variables to my advantage."
It's like the shame of an elite athlete who missed a crucial shot in the final seconds of a game. They aren't crying because the basketball feels bad about hitting the rim. They are ashamed because their performance metrics dropped. The long-lasting psychological consequences for the other person, the heartbreak, the shattered trust, the years of trauma that literally does not enter the calculation.
It is entirely absent from the equation. The internal monologue is consumed entirely with their own performance. Did I succeed in maintaining absolute control?
And if the answer is yes, they feel fine.
Yes, they feel a sense of equilibrium. If the answer is no, they experience profound shame. But that shame is directed completely inward at their own perceived lack of skill or foresight, never outward in the form of empathetic resonance with the victim.
That is a completely closed loop. They are the only real player on the board.
Pretty much.
Which really makes me wonder if they are that utterly disconnected from the humanity, the autonomy, and the internal world of the person sitting across the dinner table from them. How do they assign value to their partners?
That's a great question.
Why do they even bother pursuing relationships, marriages, and starting families if the other person's internal reality means absolutely nothing?
Well, the lack of empathy does not equate to a lack of perceived value. They do value the people in their lives, but they value them in a deeply objectified, instrumental way.
Objectified, so like tools.
Essentially, yes. The source material outlines how they categorize humans, and it is a strict, unyielding binary. There's no nuance, no gray area, no, "my partner is a wonderful person who occasionally forgets to take out the trash."
Right. They regard others through only two possible lenses: idealization or devaluation.
Those are the only two mechanisms of relationship available to the pathological narcissist.
Yeah.
And understanding the mechanics of the idealization phase is crucial, because it's almost universally misinterpreted by the people experiencing it.
This brings us to one of the most fascinating analogies provided in the material, the Porsche concept.
Oh, I love this analogy.
Yeah, let's break this down because it perfectly illustrates how idealization works in practice. The text explains that if a narcissist manages to secure a relationship with an ideal person, someone who is perhaps conventionally beautiful, highly successful, wealthy, or deeply respected in their community, the narcissist views that person fundamentally as property.
As a high-value acquisition.
Exactly. Just like owning a flashy $250,000 Porsche makes the owner look incredibly wealthy and high status to the outside world, owning a perfect partner makes the narcissist perfect.
Yes.
The partner isn't a separate human being to be loved. They are a luxury good that elevates the brand of the person holding the keys.
The clinical term for this psychological process is co-idealization.
Co-idealization.
Okay. The narcissist internal logic is built on a very specific circular foundation. The premise is, I am a flawless, godlike, omnipotent being.
Naturally.
Right? So the logical continuation is, therefore, anything I choose to acquire, anything I possess, must inherently be flawless because a god would not choose garbage. Since I possess you, you are flawless. And your flawlessness serves as objective proof to the world of my own initial flawlessness.
The shine of the object rubs off on the owner. Anyone listening to this who has ever survived the initial stages of a relationship with a narcissist will likely recognize this immediately. We always hear about the love bombing phase.
Oh yeah, everyone talks about the love bombing.
Right. The overwhelming attention, the expensive dinners, the declarations within 2 weeks that you are their soulmate and they have never felt this way before. It feels like you've stepped into a romantic movie.
But when you look at it through the lens of co-idealization, that intense love bombing isn't genuine selfless affection for who you actually are.
It's not about you at all, is it?
It has very little to do with the partner's actual identity. The love bombing is simply the narcissist buffing the paint on their new Porsche. Yeah. They are frantically elevating the partner, placing them on the highest possible pedestal so that the narcissist can then stand on that pedestal with them. During this phase, the narcissist might even appear highly accommodating, generous, and attentive.
Right. They might take on responsibilities they normally shun.
Because as long as the idealization phase is active, the primary goal, which is maintaining this perfect mirror that reflects their own grandiosity back at them, is being successfully met.
The investment of energy during love bombing yields a massive return in narcissistic supply.
Exactly. But this entire structure is built on a fatal, inescapable flaw.
Right. Nobody can remain a perfect, shiny, flawless Porsche forever. We are human beings.
We are messy.
We get tired, we get cranky, we get sick, we gain weight, we disagree with our partners, we notice discrepancies in their stories. The illusion of absolute perfection is impossible to sustain in a real day-to-day human life.
It really is.
So, what is the mechanical response when the partner inevitably steps out of that idealized two-dimensional role? What happens when the partner criticizes the narcissist or catches them in a lie?
The transition from idealization to devaluation is brutal, and it is immediate.
Immediate. No fade out.
No fade out. Because of the strict binary we discussed, the moment the partner ceases to be the perfect reflection, they instantly lose their value as an ideal object. If you are not being idealized, you must be devalued.
Wow.
But the source material makes a very specific, vital distinction about where this confrontation takes place. The environment dictates the severity of the psychological reaction.
Okay, let's look at the first scenario. Let's say you catch the narcissist in a lie, or you point out a major failure on their part, but you do it in the complete privacy of your own home. It's just the two of you in the living room. There is no audience.
Right.
How does the narcissistic mind process and react to being exposed in private?
When the exposure happens in a private setting, the immediate defense mechanism is to devalue the source of the exposure. The narcissist must instantaneously render you entirely worthless in their mind.
So if the person criticizing them is intellectually, morally, or emotionally bankrupt, then the criticism itself holds no weight. It evaporates.
That is the exact internal calculus. The text highlights a specific cognitive tactic deployed here, known as attribution error or misattribution.
Misattribution. I think we've all experienced this in minor ways, like blaming traffic when we're late instead of admitting we just didn't leave on time.
Sure, yeah.
But how does this misattribution look in the extreme context of a narcissistic confrontation?
It manifests as an immediate, vicious attack on your competence or your core morality. You might confront them with objective, undeniable facts, say, a text message proving they lied about their whereabouts.
Hard evidence.
Right. Their response isn't to address the text message. Their response is, you are simply too cognitively stunted to understand the complexities of my business relationships.
Oh,
Or they will execute a complete role reversal. You are actually the abuser here. Your constant surveillance and paranoia are victimizing me, and you're projecting your own toxic traits onto me.
they rewrite your entire character profile on the spot. I didn't lie. You are just biologically incapable of grasping my higher truth.
Exactly.
It's a masterclass in deflection that leaves the partner feeling like they are losing their grip on reality.
And this rapid oscillation from idealized soulmate to fundamentally flawed abuser stems from a deeply primitive psychological state. The clinical concept at play here is called splitting.
Splitting. Now, the text links this directly back to early childhood development, right? This isn't just a metaphor, this is an actual developmental arrest.
Yes, it is a foundational concept in psychoanalysis, often associated with object relations theory. Splitting is a primitive defense mechanism where an individual completely fails to synthesize the positive and negative qualities of someone into a cohesive, realistic whole.
Okay, so no gray area.
None. The text explicitly describes this as the moral and cognitive default of a child under the age of 2.
I want to spend some time on this because visualizing a 2-year-old's brain is just so helpful here.
It really is.
A toddler literally lacks the neural pathways to hold two conflicting ideas about their caregivers simultaneously. If mommy gives them a cookie, mommy is the most perfect, angelic being in the universe. She is all good.
Right.
10 minutes later, if mommy takes away a dangerous toy, she doesn't become a good person who is doing something I dislike. To the toddler, she instantaneously becomes a monster. She is all bad. There is absolutely zero nuance.
And that is the exact cognitive limitation we see in the adult narcissist.
Yeah.
They utilize this toddler-level primitive mechanism to protect themselves. In the face of private criticism, the narcissist instantaneously splits.
The gray areas of human complexity vanish.
Completely. They declare internally and through their behavior, I am entirely good, pure, and justified. You're entirely bad, malicious, and flawed.
And this confrontation, this moment where the partner points out a flaw and shatters the idealization, causes what the source refers to as a narcissistic injury.
Yes, narcissistic injury. It occurs because the narcissist operates with a remarkably brittle, highly precarious balance between their implicit and explicit self-esteem.
Implicit versus explicit.
Yeah, their implicit self-esteem, how they actually feel about themselves deep in the unconscious, is often entirely non-existent or profoundly wounded. But their explicit self-esteem is the towering, grandiose facade they present to the world.
It's like they're walking around inside a giant, towering mech suit made entirely of hollow, incredibly thin glass. It looks intimidating from the outside, but your criticism, even a mild private one, is a hammer striking that glass.
That's a great visual. When you intrude on their constructed fantasy with actual facts, with legitimate disagreements, you force them into a corner where they have to look at their own inadequacies.
You force them to acknowledge their erroneous choices, their failures, and their human limitations.
Yes, you are forcing them, against their will, to interface with reality.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Because in a healthy person, being forced to face reality is usually the catalyst for growth. If someone proves to me that I'm wrong about something, it stings for a minute, but then I have a realization. I apologize, I learn, and I adjust my behavior.
Right, that's the healthy response.
So does the narcissist ever have that breakthrough moment when the glass cracks?
If we look at the mechanics of the narcissistic mind, a breakthrough of that nature is a structural impossibility.
So never.
Well, the text notes that this moment of facing reality does happen, but it is incredibly fleeting. We are talking about mere microseconds.
Microseconds. It's so fast it barely registers on a conscious level.
It is a microsecond flash of unbearable, searing truth. But before that truth can be processed, before it can be integrated into their consciousness to produce anything resembling genuine remorse or growth, their grandiosity violently reasserts itself.
The defenses slam back into place like blast doors.
Exactly. And to ensure they never have to experience that microsecond of reality again, they deploy externalized aggression.
This loops back to the devaluation we just discussed. The aggression isn't just anger. It's a strategic operation to neutralize a threat.
It is entirely strategic.
Yeah.
If they can mentally and emotionally destroy you, they destroy the truth you are trying to present.
They will attack relentlessly.
They might launch a localized smear campaign within the confines of the relationship, relentlessly mocking your intelligence, your career, your family. The goal is complete invalidation.
They have to convince themselves, and ideally, convince you that you possess no wisdom, no perspicacity, and that you are utterly unworthy of consideration.
Yes.
Because if they successfully rebrand you as a crazy, stupid, abusive person whose perspective is fundamentally broken, then the criticism you just leveled at them vanishes into the ether. It doesn't count.
It was delivered by a broken machine, so the data is invalid.
So, to synthesize this for a moment, if you confront a narcissist in private, the mechanical defense is to mute you. They split, they devalue you into oblivion, and your words lose all structural impact on their fragile self-esteem.
That summarizes the private mechanism perfectly. Because the threat to their grandiosity is contained entirely within the dynamic of the two of you, the solution is simply to psychologically nullify you.
Okay, but we don't live in isolated bubbles.
No, we don't.
What happens when we change the venue? What if this exact same confrontation, catching them in a lie, exposing a massive failure, pointing out a discrepancy, happens outside the living room? What if it happens at a dinner party or in a boardroom in front of their colleagues or in front of a mentor they deeply admire? Because I have to assume that introducing an audience changes the entire psychological equation.
The introduction of an audience, particularly an audience the narcissist respects, changes the equation from a localized injury to a catastrophic system failure.
Catastrophic.
Yes. The text warns that exposing a narcissist in public, or specifically in front of people they identify with, which is a dynamic called narcissistic alignment, triggers a reaction that is exponentially more fierce and significantly more dangerous.
The source uses a very specific, very intense clinical term for this public exposure. We are no longer talking about a mere injury. The term is narcissistic mortification.
Narcissistic mortification. To truly grasp the gravity and the terror of that concept, we have to look at the foundational bedrock of pathological narcissism.
Let's do it.
The text provides deep historical context here, revealing something that runs completely counter to the popular understanding of the disorder. Pathological narcissism is not about an excess of self-love.
Which is the colloquial trap we all fall into, right? When we call someone a narcissist in pop culture, we mean they take too many selfies, they are obsessed with their reflection, they think they're the best-looking person in the room. We equate it with extreme vanity.
Right, but vanity is often a symptom, not the architecture. The text, aligning with universally agreed-upon psychoanalytic theory, states that pathological narcissism is actually a complex compensation mechanism designed to mask profound, agonizing internal shame.
Shame. And this shame almost universally stems from early childhood trauma or neglect. What specific kind of shame are we talking about?
We are talking about the core shame of absolute helplessness.
Wow.
The shame of being a vulnerable child who is completely unable to get their fundamental emotional needs met by the adults around them. It is the deep-seated, internalized conviction that they are fundamentally unlovable, unworthy, and defective at their core.
That's incredibly sad.
It is. There's a massive, dark reservoir of this shame at the center of the individual psyche.
And the narcissism itself, the towering grandiosity, the arrogance, the insistence on perfection, the demand for special treatment, is the shield against that reservoir. The text uses a brilliant word for this. It's a firewall.
The firewall is an apt technical description. The grandiosity acts as an impenetrable structural barrier between their conscious mind and this agonizing infantile shame.
So under normal everyday circumstances, the adult narcissist never actually feels this shame. The firewall works.
Yes, and this is the critical point. They avoid it because, to their unconscious mind, this shame is not just an uncomfortable emotion. It is literally perceived as life-threatening.
Life-threatening.
Experiencing it feels like existential annihilation.
So holding that architecture in mind, this life-threatening, annihilating shame, being held back by a highly brittle, grandiose firewall, what mechanically happens at that dinner party when someone publicly exposes them? When the crowd witnesses the failure and the smirks begin and the whispering starts?
When the humiliation becomes public and undeniably validated by the audience, the firewall fails.
It just fails.
The structural integrity of the grandiosity collapses entirely. This triggers a catastrophic psychological process known as decompensation.
Decompensation.
Yeah.
The fortress walls don't just crack, they disintegrate.
The narcissist is suddenly, violently unable to deny the objective truth of their failure. If their entire persona was built on being an infallible genius, they are forced to see themselves making a foolish, amateur error in front of their peers.
Right.
If their facade relied on being a wealthy, flawless success, they are exposed as a fraud. The text describes this state using an incredibly visceral word. They are left Skinless.
Skinless, just raw, entirely exposed nerve endings facing a hostile world with absolutely zero protective covering.
The mediating fantasy is gone. They are brought face to face with the internal monster of their own unlovability and shame. That is the essence of narcissistic mortification.
And how does that manifest behaviorally? What does a human being look like when they are suddenly skinless and drowning in a reservoir of life-threatening shame?
Well, the source text makes a fascinating and deeply disturbing clinical comparison here.
Yeah.
It is a profound diagnostic observation. The text notes that when a narcissist is in this decompensated, skinless state, they become clinically indistinguishable from an individual suffering from severe borderline personality disorder, or BPD.
Indistinguishable. Their internal structure collapses so completely that they effectively mirror an entirely different, highly volatile personality disorder for a period of time. Let's break down what that actually means, because BPD is characterized by extreme emotional states, right?
Exactly. Because the narcissistic defenses that usually numb them to the world are completely gone, they're suddenly besieged by the raw, overwhelming emotions they have spent their entire lives successfully repressing.
They suffer profound emotional dysregulation.
A normal person experiences an emotion like a wave that washes over them and recedes. In this state, the narcissist experiences emotion like a tsunami that pulls them under.
That's terrifying.
They feel as though they are literally drowning in panic, despair, and terror that they have no tools to manage.
And the text doesn't shy away from how dark this phase gets.
Mm.
It explicitly mentions the rapid development of suicidal ideation. And the source backs this up with a grim, sobering statistic to illustrate the sheer severity of this psychological state.
Yes, the text points out that suicide is the leading cause of death among individuals diagnosed with borderline personality disorder, citing a staggering 11% mortality rate.
11%? That is
Yeah.
massive.
It is. Now, the source doesn't use this statistic to formally diagnose the narcissist with BPD. Rather, it uses it as a benchmark to highlight the exact level of internal terror and agony the exposed narcissist is facing during mortification.
The emotional pain of being skinless is so profound, so entirely unmanageable, that ceasing to exist presents itself as the only viable, logical escape.
Yes, that is the reality of their internal experience in that moment.
If someone listening to this has ever dealt with a deeply arrogant, condescending narcissist, I think it's vital to reframe that behavior right now. Every single arrogant smirk, every condescending remark, every absolute refusal to admit fault over something trivial, it is all part of a desperate life-or-death defense mechanism.
Oh, absolutely.
They are frantically laying bricks to keep that firewall intact because the alternative is feeling an emotional pain so severe it mirrors the darkest, most lethal depths of borderline personality disorder.
It completely recontextualizes the pathology. It doesn't excuse the abuse they perpetrate, but it explains the absolute rigidity of their defenses. They are fighting for psychological survival every minute of the day.
But a human being cannot survive in a state of skinless suicidal agony for an extended period. The human brain won't allow it. As you said, the alternative is death. So they have to fix it.
Yes.
They have to scramble out of the BPD state and rebuild the grandiose fortress as quickly as possible.
They must immediately restore their grandiosity to survive the mortification. And the source text outlines that the narcissistic brain will adopt one of two very distinct, highly complex cognitive solutions to rebuild that firewall and rewrite reality.
Let's dive deep into these two solutions, because this is where the reality-bending aspect of the pathology truly takes off. The source calls the first option the internal solution. I like to conceptualize this as the puppet master protocol.
Well, puppet master, yes.
How does the internal solution mechanically work to resolve the trauma of public exposure?
In the internal solution, the narcissist resolves the agonizing cognitive dissonance of the mortification by convincing themselves that they actually orchestrated the entire humiliation from the very beginning.
Wait, let me make sure I'm grasping the sheer scale of this delusion. They are humiliated in public, exposed as a fraud, laughed at by their peers, left skinless and suicidal. And their brain eventually processes all of that data and concludes, ah, yes, everything is going exactly according to my master plan.
Precisely. They retroactively rewrite the history of the event to position themselves as the omnipotent director of the play once again.
It reminds me of a chess player who's losing a match terribly.
Okay, let's hear it.
They're getting absolutely decimated on the board. Their pieces are gone. They are sweating. And right before the opponent calls checkmate, the losing player leans back, smiles, and says, I was actually playing a completely different secret variation of chess this whole time. My goal wasn't to win your king. My goal was to test your psychological reactions to perceived victory. I wanted you to take my queen. You fell right into my trap, you absolute fool.
That analogy captures the exact mechanism. The narcissist will tell themselves, if my partner insulted me at that dinner party, it's only because I subliminally pushed her to insult me.
Unbelievable.
I deliberately fed her the wrong information weeks ago so she would criticize me erroneously in public. I orchestrated all of this to test the loyalty of my friends.
They adopt the persona of the puppet master.
Yes. In this newly rewritten reality, everyone in the room, even the people who were laughing at them, are reduced to mindless puppets dancing on the narcissist's strings.
And by successfully adopting that delusion, they instantly restore their godlike self-perception. I wasn't humiliated by people smarter than me. I'm a genius who orchestrated a complex, multi-layered social experiment that everyone else was too stupid to realize they were participating in.
And a key aspect of this internal solution, as noted by the text, is that it is entirely self-contained.
Self-contained, meaning what?
Meaning, the narcissist's grandiosity is restored internally through a cognitive shift. And the crisis largely stops there, because they have convinced themselves that the people who humiliated them were merely following a script the narcissist wrote. There is no pressing need to exact real-world vengeance against them.
Okay, so that's the internal solution. It's delusional, but it's relatively contained. But the source text outlines a second option for rebuilding the firewall, the external solution.
Yes.
And based on the material, this one is significantly more volatile and dangerous to the people around them. I tend to think of this one as the paranoid victim protocol. What triggers the external route and what happens when they choose it.
The external solution is adopted when the narcissist's brain cannot successfully execute the mental gymnastics required to convince themselves they orchestrated the event.
The reality is just too obvious.
Exactly. The reality of the humiliation is too undeniable to rewrite. So instead, they decide that the partner, or whoever exposed them, is purely, fundamentally evil.
Pure evil. We aren't talking about framing the partner as angry or mistaken or just trying to make a valid point. The narcissist assigns them the trait of absolute malice.
Absolute, unadulterated malice.
Yeah.
And it expands beyond the individual. They decide they are the targeted victim of a massive coordinated conspiracy.
Oh, conspiracy.
Yes, the internal logic dictates, I am a flawless, benevolent being.
Yeah.
No sane, good person would ever subject a flawless being to this level of agony. Therefore, she must be evil.
Wow.
And furthermore, everyone at that dinner party who laughed, everyone who colluded in this spectacle or failed to defend me, is also part of this evil cabal that is dedicated to my destruction.
So if you are the partner who finally had enough and exposed their lies, and the narcissist adopts this external solution, what is the mechanical outcome for you? What kind of behavior is coming your way?
This is where we see the intense paranoid ideation the text explicitly points out. This external solution absolutely requires vengeance to restore equilibrium. Yes. Because the threat to their grandiosity has been externalized and framed as an evil active conspiracy, the narcissist can only regain their power and rebuild their firewall by actively destroying the conspirators.
So this is the genesis of the truly vindictive, terrifying post-relationship behaviors we hear about.
Yes, exactly. The text states this cognitive framework leads directly to extreme behaviors. Relentless stalking, vexatious litigation, and massive scorched earth smear campaigns against the partner, their friends, their family, and anyone tangentially associated with the public mortification.
That's terrifying.
The narcissist is no longer just trying to clear their name or spin a story. They are on a crusade to completely obliterate the source of their mortification.
Right.
Because destroying the evil conspirators is the only way to prove to themselves that they remain omnipotent and powerful.
The scale of that reaction is just mind-boggling. Just to synthesize the section before we move on. Public exposure inflicts psychological violence on a narcissist that is so severe, it literally threatens their existence. To survive that skinless terror, their brain fractures reality. It forces them to either become a delusional puppet master who believes they secretly control the universe, or a vindictive, paranoid stalker obsessively seeking the total destruction of anyone who witnessed them fail.
That is the stark reality of narcissistic mortification and the resulting decompensation. The stakes are always absolute.
With the stakes being that astronomical, with the psychological consequences of being caught in public being so utterly catastrophic, it makes me wonder how they function day to day.
That's a good question.
Do narcissists just spend their entire lives walking on eggshells? Are
Huh.
they paralyzed by the constant terror of being exposed and facing that skinless state?
Well, logic would suggest they should become incredibly conflict avoidant to protect the firewall. But the text reveals a truly dark, paradoxical twist in the pathology.
Okay.
Sometimes instead of avoiding conflict, they do the exact opposite.
Yeah.
They will proactively, intentionally sabotage their own relationships and rig the game in advance to maintain the illusion of absolute control over their environment.
They preemptively trigger a mortification event. They decide to blow up their own lives on purpose. That is incredibly counterintuitive.
It is, until you view it through the lens of control. The text uses a very specific, common scenario to illustrate this proactive sabotage. Let's examine a dynamic where a male heterosexual narcissist begins to sense that his female partner is becoming rebellious.
Rebellious in what way? Like fighting back?
She is no longer a compliant, willing participant in what the source calls the shared fantasy. The shared fantasy is the elaborate, constructed reality the narcissist demands his partners inhabit. A reality where he is perfect, she's entirely dependent on him, and their love is mythic.
So the partner is waking up. The love bombing has worn off. She's starting to assert boundaries. She's questioning his version of events. She's pulling away emotionally.
Exactly. Her independence signals a breakdown of the shared fantasy. The narcissist, hypersensitive to any shift in supply, anticipates imminent abandonment and rejection.
Because they can see it coming.
Right. Now, genuine, unprovoked rejection is a massive mortification event. It is a catastrophic public failure of their grandiosity. Someone looked at the flawless God and said, I don't want you.
And they can't handle that.
They cannot allow themselves to be legitimately rejected because that would strip them skinless.
So they see the writing on the wall. They know she is going to leave, and they know that will destroy them. To avoid being dumped and facing that shame, what mechanism do they deploy?
To avoid being the passive victim of genuine rejection, they will consciously or unconsciously push the partner into committing an act of profound betrayal, usually infidelity.
Wait.
They orchestrate their own heartbreak.
I need to pause here because this completely shatters everything we know about human ego, jealousy, and possessiveness. We usually think of narcissists as deeply possessive. You're telling me they want their partner to sleep with someone else.
Yes.
They actively set it up. How does that even work in practice?
The text details the subtle and overt methods they use to engineer this outcome. They will strategically introduce the partner to highly eligible, attractive potential substitutes.
You're kidding.
No. They will persistently manufacture environments where cheating is statistically much more likely to occur. The text specifically notes they will encourage or facilitate heavy inebriation or drug consumption in these social settings.
They become the unseen stage managers of their own demise.
Yes, fostering an environment designed to produce one highly specific outcome: the partner's infidelity.
Okay, let's really dig into the why here because my mind is spinning. Why on earth would someone with a massively fragile ego, who is terrified of public humiliation, intentionally orchestrate a scenario where their partner cheats on them?
What's fascinating here is it all comes down to a single defining principle of the pathology. The expert in the source text summarizes it brilliantly with one phrase: God is in control.
God is in control.
If the narcissist senses the partner is gradually pulling away and is going to leave them anyway, the narcissist is losing control of the narrative. They're becoming a victim of someone else's agency.
Right.
But if they foster this elaborate theater production and the partner inevitably falls into the trap and cheats, the narcissist retains their grandiosity.
Oh, I see it. Because when the affair is discovered, the narcissist can look at the wreckage and say, I made her do this.
Precisely. The internal narrative is immediately solidified. I am the one who orchestrated this betrayal. I wrote the script of my own heartbreak. I am a pathetic victim of her genuine rejection. I am the brilliant mastermind who engineered her infidelity to test her.
That is just wow.
By orchestrating the event, they retain their omnipotence. They ensure they remain the author of the narrative, even if the narrative they are writing is a tragedy. They would rather be the director of a disaster than a supporting character in a healthy departure.
So what does this all mean? I am honestly mind-blown by the sheer volume of psychological energy, calculation, and manipulation spent solely on avoiding reality. Staggering.
It is exhausting just to analyze it, let alone live it. They're directing plays, writing scripts, shifting the scenery, turning the people who love them into unwitting puppets, orchestrating affairs, all to avoid acknowledging a single, genuine human failing or moment of vulnerability.
Yes.
Which leads me to a massive overarching question about their entire existence. If their interpersonal life is nothing more than a stage play they are constantly directing, if every single interaction is meticulously managed to protect a firewall, do they ever actually interact with the real, unvarnished world?
The definitive answer, according to the clinical realities outlined in the source material, is no.
Never.
No. And this is perhaps the most tragic, isolating, and profound point in the entire text. We have talked extensively about their terror of shame and exposure, but narcissists suffer from an equally profound terror of reality itself, which includes a terror of genuine positive emotions.
A terror of positive emotions. We always focus on the rage and the grandiosity, but they are actively afraid of experiencing genuine joy or love. Because genuine positive emotions, true love, pure joy, deep connection, require vulnerability. They require lowering the drawbridge.
Right, you have to let someone in.
Exactly. They require a connection to reality and to another human being without the protection of defenses or scripts. That level of unguarded vulnerability is terrifying to the narcissist.
Wow.
The text brings in a foundational Freudian concept here to explain how their brain handles this terror. Impaired reality testing.
Reality testing. Let's define that clearly. So reality testing is basically our mental thermostat, right?
Yes.
It's the ego's ability to objectively evaluate the outside world without too many internal distortions and then react in a way that is beneficial. If the thermostat reads that it's freezing outside, reality testing tells me to put on a winter coat rather than insisting it's summer and freezing to death.
That is an excellent way to conceptualize it. It is the continuous loop of perceiving reality, evaluating it accurately, and adjusting our behavior. And the narcissist reality testing thermostat is profoundly, comprehensively broken, particularly in the interpersonal realm.
It's just busted.
Completely. The text is unequivocal.
Yeah.
They never experience reality.
Yeah.
What their brain does, automatically and continuously, is convert all incoming reality into a fantasy format they can manage.
The source uses a very specific, almost sci-fi sounding word for this internalized fantasy construct. It calls it a paracosm.
A paracosm. In psychology, a paracosm is a highly detailed, deeply elaborate imaginary world, often created by children to cope with trauma.
Like an imaginary friend, but an entire universe.
Yes. The text argues that the narcissist doesn't just have a paracosm, they essentially are a paracosm. Their entire consciousness resides within this internalized, self-contained fantasy where they are omnipotent, perfect, and immune to shame.
And when they are forced to interact with the outside world, they don't step out of the paracosm. Instead, they attempt to externalize it by aggressively coercing other people into participating in their delusion. So when a partner tries to have a heart-to-heart conversation with them, the narcissist isn't seeing a complex human being with valid feelings. You aren't a person. You are effectively an NPC, a non-playable character in their massively multiplayer online role-playing game.
That's a perfect modern analogy.
And your only acceptable function is to follow the programming they wrote for you.
The NPC analogy perfectly captures the lack of recognized autonomy. There is no situation, the text insists, where the narcissist interacts with the world directly, unmediated, and unfiltered.
So they're translating everything.
Every word you say, every tear you shed, every boundary you set is immediately translated by their brain into their internal language of either grandiosity or victimization.
Which brings up an incredibly practical application for all of this theory, because the source text transitions into an explanation of why therapy, which is designed to heal interpersonal dysfunction, so frequently and spectacularly fails when applied to narcissists.
It is a vital clinical insight. The text specifically mentions prominent therapeutic modalities like schema therapy or Gestalt therapy, but notes this failure rate applies broadly across most traditional treatments.
And looking at the mechanics of the paracosm, the failure makes perfect sense.
It does. To understand why it fails, we have to look at the fundamental assumption every therapist makes when a client walks into their office. The common mistake therapists make is perceiving the narcissist as a functioning adult who is embedded in reality.
Right. A highly trained therapist sits down in their office with a 45-year-old executive who happens to have narcissistic personality disorder. The therapist looks across the room and sees an adult wearing a suit who holds a demanding job, pays a mortgage, and uses an advanced vocabulary.
A seemingly normal adult.
Naturally, the therapist analyzes this person's marital problems as goal-oriented adult actions attempting to navigate the real world. They say things like, when you use that tone of voice with your wife, it causes a breakdown in communication. Let's role-play a better conflict resolution strategy.
But that entirely logical approach is fundamentally structurally flawed. Because, as the text reveals, the therapist fails to realize that the person sitting on their couch is not an adult attempting to navigate reality.
The narcissist is, psychologically speaking, a traumatized toddler entirely embedded in a fantasy narrative.
Exactly. Let's look at Gestalt therapy, for example, which often uses the empty chair technique to help clients role-play and process unresolved feelings with a spouse. Gestalt requires the client to step outside themselves and engage with the reality of the other person.
But if the narcissist is already role-playing a fictional character in a lifelong paracosm, asking them to role-play in therapy is just adding another layer of delusion.
That's useless.
You are speaking two completely different, fundamentally incompatible languages. The therapist is speaking the language of reality, cause and effect, and mutual empathy. The narcissist is speaking the language of fantasy defense, grandiosity, and avoiding the shame monster.
You can't give an adult communication tools if the entity you are actually talking to is a 2-year-old furiously defending a fortress.
I want to pause and highlight how incredibly validating this specific insight must be for anyone listening who has ever tried dragging a narcissist to couples counseling, hoping for a breakthrough.
Couples counseling with a narcissist is almost universally described by the non-narcissistic partner as a profoundly crazy-making, deeply destabilizing experience.
Exactly. You sit in that therapist's office, desperate for a neutral third party to validate your reality, and you listen to the narcissist calmly, convincingly describe an argument you had on Tuesday.
Right.
But they recount a version of events that is so wildly distorted, so entirely divorced from the objective facts of what actually happened in your kitchen, that you literally feel like you are losing your grip on your own sanity.
Gaslighting on a profound level.
You start questioning your own memory. But this text validates that you aren't crazy. You literally were speaking different languages. You were trying to negotiate shared reality, and they were fiercely defending a fantasy paracosm.
Yeah. The partner is in the office trying to figure out how to change the oil and fix the engine of a shared car. The narcissist is using the session to prove that the car is actually an interstellar spaceship, and they are the undisputed captain of the galaxy.
You cannot make therapeutic progress when the fundamental premises of existence do not align.
It's impossible.
Okay, but this raises a huge, glaring contradiction in my mind, and it's one the source text directly addresses. We are talking about paracosms and 2-year-old defense mechanisms, but we also know that many narcissists are highly intelligent.
Very much so.
The text explicitly states they are not intellectually challenged. We see them as brilliant surgeons, cutthroat CEOs, incredibly savvy politicians. If their cognitive processing power is that high, don't they ever realize they are faking it? Don't they ever look around their paracosm, look at their accolades, and think, I am living in a complete fantasy world. I am an absolute fraud.
They absolutely do realize it. And this brings us to one of the most twisted, fascinating, and counterintuitive revelations in the entire clinical text: the narcissist's highly unique experience of imposter syndrome.
Because the source reveals that deep down, beneath the firewall, many narcissists do know they are one step removed from reality.
Yes, because, as we discussed earlier, they occasionally experience those fleeting microseconds of reality during narcissistic injuries or public mortifications.
Right, the flash of truth.
They have accidentally touched the searing hot stove of objective truth, even if only for a fraction of a second before the grandiosity kicked back in. So they know the stove exists.
They know that a concrete reality exists outside their paracosm.
And they're highly aware that this reality is largely inaccessible to them because they cannot survive without their grandiose defenses.
So they know they are faking their entire persona. They know their normal mode of existence is an elaborate, non-realistic simulation.
They are consciously aware on some level that they are imposters in the human experience. And the text notes they will even engage in blatant, easily disprovable self-deception in areas where they don't even have a comparative advantage to begin with, just to maintain the comprehensive nature of the delusion.
Let's ground that in a concrete example. What does that look like?
Well, the text provides a perfect illustration. Imagine a narcissist who is genuinely intellectually endowed, perhaps a true certified genius in mathematics or physics.
Okay.
But this same individual is physically very unattractive, perhaps even aggressively so. Now, a normal, healthy logic would dictate, I'm a brilliant physicist, but I'm not traditionally good-looking, and that's perfectly fine.
Right, a normal person accepts reality where it is and plays to their actual strengths. I will derive my self-esteem from my incredible brain and my contributions to science.
But the narcissist architecture cannot allow for a localized imperfection. The text points out that he will actively deceive himself about his physical appearance. He will look in the mirror and tell himself, I am a historically brilliant physicist, and I am a drop-dead, gorgeous, highly desirable Adonis.
But the world won't reflect that back to him.
Exactly. And when he propositions a woman, and she inevitably rejects him because she isn't attracted to him, he won't face the reality of his appearance. His reality testing will fail, and his brain will rewrite the scenario.
So he'll say something like, wow, she must be completely blind or intimidated by my overwhelming perfection.
Exactly that.
It's astounding. So even when they possess genuine world-class gifts in one area, the paracosm demands absolute, uncompromising perfection across the board. The delusion has to be 360 degrees or the whole thing falls apart.
It must be comprehensive.
Mm-hmm.
And because they are highly intelligent, and because they are constantly enforcing this comprehensive, exhausting delusion upon the world, they inevitably develop a profound sense of imposter syndrome.
Because they know they aren't the Adonis.
They know they aren't the flawless God. But, as the source points out,
Here is the twist. Because literally everything about the narcissist is an inversion of normal human emotion.
precisely, if we look at the clinical difference between how a healthy, neurotypical person experiences imposter syndrome versus how a pathological narcissist experiences it, the contrast is just breathtaking.
Let's set the baseline with a normal person. If a normal, empathetic person gets a massive promotion at work that they secretly feel they aren't qualified for, they develop imposter syndrome.
Right, very common.
And it feels awful. They feel this horrible, grinding cognitive dissonance. They suffer from anxiety. They have nightmares about being found out, being exposed as a fraud in front of their colleagues, and losing everything they've worked for. It is a deeply unpleasant, fear-based, paralyzing emotion.
For a healthy person, it is a state of chronic anxiety and dread. But for the narcissist, the text reveals that their imposter syndrome generates a state of narcissistic elation.
Elation. They literally get high off the knowledge that they are a fraud.
They experience a profound psychological rush. They view their imposter status not as a source of anxiety, but as the ultimate validation of their superiority. It is their greatest accomplishment.
The text outlines their internal monologue in this state, and it is chilling. It's essentially a voice in their head constantly whispering, how on earth did I pull this off? I deceive people every single day. I manipulate my way to the top of the corporate ladder. I become a president, a CEO, a respected community leader, and I am faking all of it.
Yes.
The people around me must be exceedingly, unimaginably stupid.
There is immense, bottomless contempt for humanity wrapped up in this elation. The fact that they are an imposter, hiding in plain sight and successfully pulling the wool over the eyes of everyone they meet, serves as the ultimate undeniable proof to them that they are vastly intellectually and evolutionarily superior to the rest of the human race.
It's hiding in plain sight as the ultimate supremacy flex. I am so much smarter, so much more evolved than all of you that I can exist as a complete, utter fraud right in front of your faces, take your money, take your affection, and you are all too blind and dumb to even notice the strings I'm pulling.
It's incredible, really.
Every single normal human emotion we've unpacked today, from remorse to shame to the fear of being exposed as a fraud, is completely mathematically inverted by the narcissist's mind. They take the raw materials of human vulnerability and forge them into weapons designed to prove they are a god.
It is a closed, perfectly engineered, inescapable system of self-delusion. The imposter syndrome doesn't break the grandiosity. It fuels the grandiosity.
The internal shame doesn't create humility or empathy. It creates the impenetrable firewall of arrogance.
Exactly. The entire psychic structure, every behavior, every lie, every manipulation is dedicated to one singular, exhausting goal: protecting the terrified, traumatized child within from ever having to face the reality of their own human imperfection.
We have covered an immense, heavy amount of psychological ground today, and I want to just take a moment to pull all these disparate threads together to see the full tapestry.
Let's do it.
We started by looking at how they view their partners not as autonomous equals, but as shiny, high-status Porsches, relentlessly polishing them up in the love-bombing phase merely to reflect their own glory. We explored the toddler-level cognitive splitting that occurs in private when they are criticized, that immediate, thoughtless, I'm all good, you're all bad reflex.
Well, examine the mechanics of narcissistic mortification. The sheer existential terror of public exposure, where the firewall completely disintegrates and they're left skinless, facing a shame so agonizing it mimics the suicidal depths of borderline personality disorder.
We looked at the terrifying, reality-bending lengths they will go to rebuild that fortress. Whether it's choosing the external solution and becoming a paranoid, vindictive stalker out to destroy their perceived enemies, or choosing the internal solution and actively orchestrating their own partner's infidelity just so they can claim they were the omnipotent puppet master pulling the strings all along.
And finally, we saw how they exist entirely within a self-contained paracosm, getting high off their own twisted imposter syndrome, genuinely believing that their ability to deceive the world is the ultimate, undeniable proof of their godhood.
If there is one fundamental, actionable takeaway from the profound source material we've explored today, it is a message of radical recalibration for anyone listening who is currently dealing with a narcissist in their personal or professional life.
Absolutely.
If you are applying normal human logic to their actions, if you are expecting genuine, empathy-driven remorse for the pain they've caused you, or if you are holding out hope for a therapeutic breakthrough where they finally see the light and acknowledge your reality, you are falling into a dangerous trap.
You are attempting to negotiate with a paracosm. You are demanding reality from a psychological system that was explicitly, purposefully designed to annihilate reality.
You cannot win by playing their game because they own the board, they wrote the rules, and they will flip the table the moment they start losing. Understanding the deep mechanics of their mind doesn't mean you can fix them. You can't.
No, you really can't.
But it does mean you can finally stop trying to decipher their chaotic, hurtful actions through the lens of a healthy human being. You can stop taking their rewriting of reality personally.
That's the most freeing realization.
Which brings us to the end of our deep dive today. We have thoroughly deconstructed this profoundly complex material, and honestly, it is a lot to process. But before we go, I want to leave a lingering, provocative thought on the table for you. It's something that builds on the core architecture we discussed today. We've learned today that a narcissist's entire reality, the towering arrogance, the casual cruelty, the elaborate manipulations, the chilling lack of empathy, is essentially just a frantic, lifelong defense mechanism. It is a paracosm built by a traumatized, emotionally arrested child to avoid a life-threatening encounter with shame.
Yeah.
So the next time you find yourself locked in a bitter, exhausting argument with a narcissist, trying desperately to make them see reason, trying to make them acknowledge a basic objective fact, or trying to appeal to their sense of humanity, I want you to stop.
Yeah.
Look closely at the dynamic and ask yourself a question.
It's a vital question.
Who are you really fighting? The adult standing right in front of you in the suit? Or the invisible, terrified 2-year-old running the simulation?
That is the thought to leave on.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive.
It has been a pleasure to explore this with you. Until next time.